Meet the family of Dr. Robert Burns Chamberlin, of Twinsburg. His father, Achel, was born in 1847 in Solon, Ohio. Achel was the youngest son of Hiram and Clorinda Chamberlin. In 1864, at the age of 17, Achel joined the 150th Ohio Volunteer Infantry. His regiment was sent to Washington, D.C., to guard the forts surrounding Washington. They took part in defending Fort Stevens, against the Confederate troops of General Jubal Early. Achel mustered out of the Army in August 1864, but re-enlisted as a corporal in September. He then served in the 177th Ohio Volunteer Infantry. The 177th took part in the Siege of Murfreesboro, the capture of Fort Anderson, and the surrender of General Joe Johnson. Achel mustered out in Greensboro, North Carolina in June 1865, and returned to Solon. In 1867, Achel married Agnes Cochran, the daughter of Scottish immigrants, Robert and Agnes Cochran of Twinsburg. The Cochrans built the first stone house in Twinsburg in 1836. That house is still standing on Liberty Road. Achel and Agnes settled on a 200-acre farm in Solon, just outside Twinsburg. They had 5 children, 4 boys and 1 girl, but only their oldest and youngest son survived past infancy. Adelbert, better known as Bert, was the oldest and was born in 1868. Robert was their youngest son, and was born in 1880. Robert and Bert both attended school at the Solon District School, at Pettibone and Route 91. Robert and Bert enjoyed the outdoors, and spent their free time fishing, hunting, and trapping. In 1895, Robert moved to Twinsburg. He graduated from Twinsburg High School in 1898. In the fall of 1898, Robert entered Western Reserve Dental School. The following year, his father died at the age of 51. Robert graduated from Western Reserve Dental School in 1901 and started a dental practice in Twinsburg. The same year, he married Gertie Parmalee. Gertie was the only child of Elsa and Evelyn Parmalee. Evelyn Parmalee, like Robert's father, was a Civil War veteran. Evelyn was a corporal and also served with the 177th Regiment, but in a different company. In 1867, Twinsburg constructed a Civil War monument on the square. Most of the sandstone for the base came from the property of Gertie's great-grandfather, Gardner Parmalee. In 1901, Robert Chamberlin entered Cleveland Medical College of Western Reserve University. He worked his way through medical school as a dentist. In 1902, Robert's brother Bert married Hattie Krause, one of 8 children of George and Magdalene Krause. George and Magdalene were German immigrants that met and married in Twinsburg. George Krause was a plumber and tinsmith like his father. He operated a tin shop in the former Baptist church on the north end of Twinsburg Square. A few years after George Krause died, Charles Richner of Cleveland purchased the Krause tin shop. It became Richner Hardware and remained a family-owned business for 95 years, from 1919 to 2014. Robert graduated from medical school in 1904 and opened a practice in Twinsburg. In the summer of 1906, Robert and Gertie had their first child, Glenn Evelyn Chamberlin. Tragically, 3 days after giving birth, Gertie died. Lula Culhan, Gertie's cousin and a former Twinsburg schoolteacher, took care of baby Glenn. Lula was the oldest daughter of John and Estella Culhan. Lula's younger brother, Manly, and his wife Mabel Culhan lived next to the Congregational Church on the square. Robert and Lula began to date. In August of 1907, Robert and Lula were married. Besides fishing, hunting, and the outdoors, both Chamberlin brothers loved music. They were members of the Twinsburg concert band. Robert was the band leader. He played the trombone and Bert played the baritone horn. In 1910, the Western Reserve Orchestra was formed. Dr. R.B. Chamberlin was the orchestra leader. His wife Lula played the cello. His brother Bert was second violin. His brother-in-law, Manly Cullen, played the cornet, and his wife Mabel played the piano. Dr. R.B. Chamberlin and his family lived in a home originally built by Ethan Alling in 1837. The house was enlarged. Part of the house was used for his medical practice. In 1913, the Samuel Bissell Memorial Library Association decided to publish a book on the first 100 years of Twinsburg history. The book was going to be part of Twinsburg's 1917 centennial celebration, which included the 50-year anniversary of the Civil War monument. The completed book was titled Twinsburg, Ohio, 1817 to 1917. The book was also known as the Green Book. Dr. Chamberlin and Mr. Walter Lister were on the Centennial Committee, in charge of finances. About that same time, Dr. Chamberlin became the first car owner in Twinsburg. Here, he is showing his car in front of the McCreary store, which was also built by Ethan Alling. Young Glenn Chamberlin, waiting for his first ride. In 1925, Glenn Chamberlin graduated from Twinsburg High School and entered medical school. After graduating from Western Reserve Medical School and completing his internship, he started a separate medical practice with his father in Twinsburg. In June of 1929, Glenn married Margaret Gregg. Margaret was the valedictorian of the Twinsburg class of 1927. Margaret was the oldest daughter of Linley and Lillian Gregg. In January 1930, Dr. Robert Chamberlin's mother Agnes died, at the age of 86. In June, Glenn and Margaret had their first child, Anne Maurice. In January 1934, they had their second daughter, Georgia Lynn. And in May 1940, their third daughter, Carol Jean, was born. Croquet became Dr. Chamberlin's new hobby. He organized and started the Twinsburg All-In Croquet Club. The Croquet Club was very active in the 1940s and 1950s. The croquet court was in Dr. Chamberlin's backyard. A leaderboard was attached to his garage. The court was lighted for night play, and even had a lighted scoreboard, made by Twinsburg postmaster, Fred Jung. The club members were mostly local business owners, members of the Rotary Club and Masonic Lodge. They played most every summer evening, weather permitting. Dr. Chamberlin took great pride in keeping the croquet court in top condition. The club standings were published in the local newspaper. In 1948, Anne graduated from Twinsburg High School and headed to Ohio Wesleyan University and Kent State. After graduating, Anne became a Latin teacher in Cleveland Heights. In 1952, Georgia graduated from Twinsburg High School and went to the University of Wisconsin. Georgia became a professor of art education at the University of Kentucky. She received her Ph.D. at Ohio State University. In 1999, Dr. Georgia Collins was honored in Washington, D.C., with the National Higher Education Art Educator of the Year Award. In 1958, Carol graduated from Twinsburg High School. Her class was the last class to graduate from the old Twinsburg High School. She attended University of Michigan and Kent State. In 1963, Carol graduated from the Francis Payne Bolton School of Nursing of Western Reserve University. She received her Master's of Nursing from Kent University. Dr. Chamberlin loved the outdoors and fishing. He enjoyed designing and making his own fishing lures. The book he is holding is about muskies, titled, Our Muskies. Dr. Chamberlin wrote the book in 1946. He especially loved fishing for muskies, and took frequent fishing trips to Canada and Wisconsin. In December 1950, he wrote an article for the magazine, Outdoor Life, about fishing on a Wisconsin lake. When everyone else stayed in the comfort of the fishing lodge during a very cold and rainy day, he went out and set a personal record of catching 6 muskies. The article was titled, "Is This a Fishing Record?" Dr. Chamberlin filmed many of his outdoor adventures. He took photos and home movies of his muskies he caught before releasing them. Over the years, he created a large library of 16mm films, and enjoyed showing them to local civic groups. The Chamberlin family were outdoorsmen and hunters. Dr. Chamberlin's grandfather, Hiram Chamberlin, successfully hunted deer into his 80s. Bert and Robert were both hunters. One of Dr. Chamberlin's close friends and hunting partners was Ellsworth McCreary. Ellsworth also ran the local grocery store. When Dr. Chamberlin wasn't hunting or fishing, he made time to manage the local baseball team, which also included his hunting friend Ellsworth McCreary and Robert's brother-in-law, Manly Cullen. Dr. Chamberlin was a 32nd-degree Mason and member of the Twinsburg Masonic Lodge for over 50 years. In September 1954, Dr. Robert Chamberlin was honored by his colleagues at a dinner held at the Portage Country Club, in Akron, to celebrate his 50 years in the medical profession. While in his backyard with his dog Sandy, watering his beloved croquet court, Dr. Robert Chamberlin died of a heart attack at the age of 75 on April 24, 1956. The following year in 1957, Twinsburg broke ground for a new school. The school was named R.B. Chamberlin High School in honor of Dr. Chamberlin, who practiced medicine in Twinsburg for 55 years. The groundbreaking ceremony and dedication was attended by his widow, Lula, and his son Dr. Glenn Chamberlin. 4 of Dr. Robert Chamberlin's great-granddaughters graduated from the high school named in his honor. They were the daughters of Anne Elliott and Carol Cornell. Stephanie Elliott in 1972. Rebecca Elliott Crosby in 1975. Jennifer Cornell Guernsey in 1982. And Glenda Cornell Taylor in 1985. Then the children of Dr. Chamberlin's great-granddaughter, Rebecca Elliott Crosby, graduated from R.B. Chamberlin High School. His great-great-granddaughter, Gwen Crosby, in 1995. And his great-great-grandson, Jerry Crosby, in 1996. In January 1961, Lula and Dr. Glenn Chamberlin sold the front yard of the Chamberlin property to build a new library. The library was dedicated in 1963. Carol spent almost her entire nursing career at Bedford Hospital, first in obstetrics, and then moving to the emergency room, which she eventually headed. Carol frequently drafted her children into serving as victims in Bedford Hospital's emergency room disaster drills. Carol received her master's degree in nursing from Kent State University, and became the assistant director of nursing at Bedford. Both Doctors Robert and Glenn Chamberlin were family doctors who still made house calls. Over their combined 95 years of service, they delivered more than their fair share of Twinsburg area babies at Bedford Hospital. Dr. Glenn Chamberlin practiced medicine in Twinsburg for 40 years, until his death in 1973. The city of Twinsburg honored him by naming the park at the new municipal swimming pool, the Glenn Chamberlin Park. The park offers a pavilion, basketball court, tennis court, playground, a picnic shelter, grills, and hiking trails. Glenn Chamberlin Park is located behind the school named after his father. The Chamberlins of Twinsburg. A family of sharing and giving for over a century. Dr. Robert Chamberlin practiced medicine in Twinsburg for 55 years. Dr. Glenn Chamberlin practiced medicine in Twinsburg for 40 years. His granddaughter, Carol Chamberlin Cornell, was a nurse and administrator for 22 years. A very special thanks to Georgia Collins and the Chamberlin family for sharing their family photos and films.